The word that wasn't about words. Harlem didn't announce itself with neon. It announced itself with rhythm. Footsteps on cracked sidewalks, a saxophone crying from an upstairs window, dominoes snapping like tiny gunshots on a folding table, church ladies moving like queens through steam rising off manholes. People who didn't live there called it rough. People who did called it home. And in Harlem, home wasn't a place you owned, it was a place you defended. Bumpy Johnson understood that better than most. Not because he liked violence, he didn't. Not because he enjoyed fear, he didn't. But because he'd seen what happened when outsiders treated a neighborhood like a buffet. Take what you want, leave the mess, blame the people who have to clean it up. He carried himself with a calm that made nervous men feel exposed. His suits were clean, his shoes always polished, and his voice stayed steady even when the air around him didn't. On that particular morning, the air felt wrong before anyone said a thing. It started with a boy named Calvin or Cal Monroe, 13 years old and too skinny for the winter coat he wore. He was delivering groceries from a corner store to earn pennies. Not stealing, not hustling, just working like his mother taught him, because pride in Harlem was often the only thing people could afford to keep. Cal stepped into the wrong doorway at the wrong moment. The Savoy Lounge sat in a busy stretch of Lenox Avenue. It wasn't the real Savoy Ballroom. Those glory days had already begun fading into memory. But this place borrowed the name and tried to borrow the respect. Inside, the lighting was warm, the music was smooth, and men sat with their shoulders wide, as if taking up more space could protect them from the truth of who they were. Bumpy didn't run the Savoy Lounge. He didn't need to. People assumed he ran everything because he was visible and because he spoke to folks like their lives mattered. He had the kind of reputation that traveled ahead of him, sometimes unfairly, sometimes deservedly, always loudly. But the real power he held wasn't in fear, it was in influence. He knew names, histories, deaths, promises, and betrayals. He knew who needed help and who was pretending not to. Cal pushed the door open carefully, grocery bag clutched to his chest. He wasn't supposed to go inside, just leave the package at the entrance and wait for a tip. But an older man outside had waved him in. "Back door's rocked, kid," the man had said, chewing a toothpick like it was the last thing holding him together. "Take it in, don't be shy." Cal believed him. That was the first mistake. The second mistake belonged to a man called Frankie Two Rings Manfredi, an Italian mobster from downtown who wore his arrogance like cologne. He had 2 pinky rings and a grin that suggested the world owed him laughter. Frankie wasn't the boss of the Mafia. He wasn't even close. He was the kind of man who dreamed of becoming a legend and settled for becoming a problem. When Frankie had come to Harlem with 3 men and a purpose that didn't belong there, they wanted a cut. Not a partnership, not a fair deal, not a conversation, a cut. Because that's what some men believed respect was, money handed over so you could breathe without permission. When Cal stepped inside, Frankie noticed him immediately, not because Cal was important, but because Frankie liked using small people to feel big. Cal walked toward the bar, eyes searching for the man whose name was written on the receipt. He never made it. Frankie stood up, blocking Cal's path with the slow satisfaction of a bully discovering a new target. He looked Cal up and down as if inspecting a piece of furniture. "What's this?" Frankie said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Harlem using kids as waiters now?" Cal swallowed. "I'm delivering groceries, sir, for Mr. Haskins." Frankie tilted his head, amused. "Sir?" He laughed and spread his arms like he was welcoming the room into a joke. "Hear that? Sir? This little... Cal felt the word coming before it arrived, like a hand raised before a slap. Frankie said a racial slur, ugly, sharp, and practiced. The room didn't cheer, it didn't laugh, it didn't even gasp, it did something worse. It went quiet. The kind of quiet that meant everybody was counting how many steps they were from danger. Cal froze. His face turned the color of shame, because that's what hateful words do. They don't just insult you, they try to make you feel like you deserve the insult. The bartender's jaw tightened. A couple at a corner table stared down at their drinks. Someone near the jukebox stopped moving completely, like he was hoping stillness could make him invisible. And then, without raising his voice, a man said, "Frankie." Just Frankie. It wasn't shouted, it wasn't dramatic, it wasn't the kind of warning that makes Hollywood proud. It was calm, so calm that it forced every ear in the room to turn towards it. Bumpy Johnson sat near the back, a small table by the wall. He'd been meeting with a church deacon about a winter coat drive. On the table were papers and a list of names, families who needed help, elders who lived alone, kids whose shoes didn't make it through December. That was the side of Bumpy no newspaper cared to print, because kindness never sold like scandal. Bumpy looked at Cal's name on the coat drive list and felt something settle in his chest, something he couldn't afford to ignore. This was bigger than him, bigger than Frankie, bigger than money. Because when a grown man uses hate to scare a child and nobody answers, hate learns it can live there. And Bumpy Johnson had decided, quietly and firmly, not in Harlem, not while he could still stand. A lesson Harlem couldn't afford to skip. The third day after Frankie's visit, a black Cadillac rolled slowly along Lenox Avenue like it was sightseeing. Two men sat in front, hats low, eyes scanning. The car didn't stop. It didn't need to. The message was in the pace, slow enough to be seen, quiet enough to deny. Harlem noticed anyway. Bumpy got the reports the way he always did, not through official channels, but through people. A barber who heard someone talking too loud, a doorman who recognized a face from downtown, a church usher who saw unfamiliar shoes stepping into familiar hallways. And then there was Cal. Cal didn't want to be brave, he just wanted to deliver groceries and go home. But courage often shows up wearing the clothes of necessity. When he saw the Cadillac pass, he remembered Frankie's eyes, how mean they looked when he thought nobody could challenge him. Cal ran to the corner store and told Mr. Haskins, who told the barber, who told the deacon, who told a man who knew how to find Bumpy. That evening, Bumpy met with community leaders in the basement of a church, not because he wanted to hide, but because he respected the space. He listened more than he talked. Mothers spoke about fear. Shop owners spoke about losing business if violence returned. Young men spoke about wanting to strike first so they wouldn't be struck at all. Bumpy let them talk until the room ran out of noise. Then he said, "We're not going to turn Harlem into their playground." A young man snapped, "So what, we just let them roll in here and disrespect us?" Bumpy looked at him, patient. "No, we don't let them disrespect us, but we also don't let them turn us into what they expect. If they can make us reckless, they win twice." The deacon cleared his throat. "What are you suggesting?" Bumpy folded his hands. "We do what Harlem does best," he said. "We stand together. We protect the vulnerable. We make sure the children aren't the ones paying for adult pride." Somebody muttered, "That's nice talk, but they're Mafia." Bumpy nodded. "And we're Harlem," he said. "They don't understand what that means." The plan wasn't flashy. It wasn't criminal genius. It was community strategy. Neighborhood watches, church volunteers escorting kids, shopkeepers sharing information, respected elders acting as visible calm. Bumpy wasn't calling for war. He was calling for unity. That same night, Bumpy visited Loretta Monroe's apartment.
He didn't come with gifts to impress her. He came with a winter coat for Cal, one of the first coats from the drive, and a quiet apology that Cal had ever been put in that position. Loretta didn't trust easily, but she respected honesty. "My son told you you stood in front of him," she said. Bumpy looked down at Cal, then back at Loretta. "Any man who uses hate on a child is a coward," he said. "I won't let cowards teach Harlem what it is." Loretta studied him, searching for the catch. "Why do you care?" she asked. "People say you're dangerous." Bumpy didn't argue with her. "I've done wrong," he admitted. "I'm not here to pretend otherwise, but I know what it feels like to be treated like you don't belong on your own street. I know what it does to a boy's spirit. And I know this, if we don't protect the children, we don't have a future worth defending." Loretta's eyes softened just a little. Cal held the coat like it was more than fabric, like it was proof that he mattered. Outside, downtown men kept watching. Frankie wasn't the type to return alone. He needed witnesses for his pride. He needed a story where he looked strong again. He needed to erase the feeling of backing down. So he called in favors. He told bigger men a smaller truth. Harlem's getting out of line. And bigger men who didn't like the idea of any neighborhood setting a precedent started listening. By the end of the week, word came through a trusted channel. Frankie planned to make an example at the Savoy Lounge. Same place, same stage, bigger audience. The neighborhood tensed like a fist. Some men wanted weapons, others wanted to hide. The church wanted peace, the street wanted pride. Bumpy wanted something harder than both: control. He returned to the Savoy Lounge the afternoon before Frankie's rumored visit. The bartender tried to smile like everything was normal, but his hands shook while he wiped glasses. Bumpy sat at the same table. He looked at the same wall. He listened to the same music. And he waited, not for Frankie, but for the people. Because Bumpy understood something powerful. Fear isolates. Respect unites. When folks saw him sitting there calmly, they felt their own panic loosen a notch. When they saw him greeting elders, nodding at mothers, speaking kindly to workers, they remembered who they were before fear tried to rewrite them. A man approached Bumpy quietly. "Are you sure this is wise?" he asked. Bumpy answered softly. "Wise isn't always safe, but safe isn't always right." That night, Cal couldn't sleep. He kept hearing the slur in his head like an echo he couldn't shut off. Loretta sat beside him and told him stories. Stories of ancestors who survived worse than words. Stories of people who turned pain into purpose. "Your worth isn't decided by their mouths. It's decided by your heart," she said. "What if they come back?" Cal whispered. Loretta hesitated, then said the sentence that surprised even her. "Then Harlem will answer."
When pride wants blood and wisdom refuses. Frankie arrived on a Saturday night, exactly like rumors said he would. Not alone. 3 cars this time, 8 men. They walked into the Savoy Lounge like they owned the floor beneath their shoes. But something was different. The room wasn't empty. The room wasn't scattered. The room wasn't hiding. The bartender stood straighter. The elders sat in the front like they'd paid for the best seats. The deacon was there, not to bless violence, but to witness. Loretta stood near the back with other mothers, arms crossed, faces tight, refusing to be chased out of their own story. And Bumpy Johnson sat at his table, calm as ever. Frankie spotted him and smirked, as if relief washed over him, relief that the target had shown up on time. "Bumpy," Frankie called out, "we need to talk." Bumpy didn't rise right away. He let the room feel the moment, the way a conductor lets silence build before the orchestra plays. Then he stood. Frankie walked forward, swaggering. "You embarrassed me," he said, "in front of my people." Bumpy's eyes didn't harden.
They cleared. "You embarrassed yourself," he replied, "by attacking a child with hate." Frankie's jaw clenched. "That's not your business." Bumpy took one step closer. "In Harlem," he said evenly, "children are everyone's business." Frankie's men shifted, scanning. They were used to fear. They weren't used to a room that refused to flinch. Frankie tried to regain control with volume. "You think this neighborhood can talk to us like that?" Bumpy answered without raising his voice. "I think this neighborhood can decide what it tolerates." Frankie scoffed. "You're acting like you're some kind of king." Bumpy paused, then said something that landed heavy. "I'm not a king. I'm a neighbor." That word, neighbor, hit the room like a reminder. Harlem wasn't a battlefield. It was a block, a stoop, a church pew, a school hallway, a place where people borrowed sugar and held each other up when the rent came due. Frankie didn't know what to do with that, so he reached for what he knew, intimidation. He leaned in and spoke harshly, slurs and threats laced together, trying to turn the room into prey. Bumpy didn't react to the hate. He reacted to the danger behind it. He lifted a hand, not a fist, a hand, open and steady. "Stop," he said. Frankie blinked. "Or what?" Bumpy's voice stayed calm. "Or you'll leave here carrying something heavier than pride," he said, "and I'm trying to save you from that." Frankie laughed, but his laugh sounded thin. "Save me?" Bumpy nodded once. "Because you don't understand what you stepped into," he said. "You think this is about money. It isn't. It's about dignity, and dignity is the one thing Harlem will bleed for if it must." The room held its breath. This could have become a tragedy right there, a spark, a shout, a lunge. Instead, an elder, a man with silver hair and a cane, stood up slowly near the front. He looked at Frankie and said, "Son, you're lost." Frankie's eyes flicked to him, confused. The elder continued, voice steady. "You can come in here with numbers and noise, but you can't buy belonging, and you can't threaten what you don't understand." Then the deacon stood. Then a shop owner stood. Then a waitress stood. Then Loretta stood, hand resting on Cal's shoulder. And in that moment, Frankie realized something terrifying. He wasn't facing Bumpy. He was facing Harlem. Frankie's men noticed it too. They weren't eager to fight a community that looked ready to stand together, not because they were afraid of punches, but because they understood consequences. A neighborhood unified was harder to break than a man alone. Frankie swallowed. He wanted to spit back a threat. He wanted to reclaim dominance, but the room's quiet strength made his words feel small. Bumpy watched him carefully, then said, almost gently, "You came here to be remembered," he said, "so be remembered for leaving without hurting anyone." Frankie's nostrils flared. His pride screamed at him to swing. But pride doesn't pay hospital bills. Pride doesn't stop bodies from falling. Pride doesn't keep you alive when your own men decide you're too reckless to follow. Frankie backed up, forcing a grin that wasn't convincing. "This ain't over," he muttered, repeating his old line like a man clinging to a script. Bumpy's response was quiet. "It is," he said, "because you learned the rule." Frankie paused, then asked, "What rule?" Bumpy repeated the same 6 words, calm, unshakable. "In Harlem, respect is the law." Frankie left with his men, and this time nobody chased them, nobody cheered, nobody celebrated. Harlem simply breathed again, because the victory wasn't that the Mafia retreated. The victory was that hate didn't get to rewrite the neighborhood's soul. The kind of power that doesn't need a gun. A week passed, then 2. Frankie didn't return. More importantly, the bigger men behind him didn't return either. Not because they suddenly became kind, but because they understood something practical. Harlem wasn't an easy mark when it stood together. You could bully a person. You couldn't easily bully a united community without inviting attention you didn't want. Bumpy didn't hold a parade. He didn't make speeches. He didn't posture. He went back to work. He kept meeting with the deacon about the coat drive. He kept helping the corner store owners keep their doors open. He kept encouraging young men to find steady work when they could and to protect their pride without destroying their futures. Loretta noticed something unexpected. Cal started walking taller. Not arrogant, not reckless, just steadier. One night, Cal asked his mother, "Why did that 6-word thing work?" Loretta smiled sadly. "Because it wasn't just words," she said. "It was a boundary, and a boundary backed by community is stronger than a threat backed by ego." Cal thought about it, then asked, "Is Bumpy a good man?" Loretta paused, choosing honesty over simplicity. "He's a complicated man," she said, "but he did a good thing. And sometimes a good thing can change a boy's life." Cal nodded slowly. "I want to be the kind of man who protects kids," he whispered. Loretta touched his cheek. "Then start now," she said. "Protect your own heart. Don't let hate move in." In Harlem, stories traveled. People repeated that moment at the Savoy Lounge like a lesson, not because it was glamorous, but because it was rare. A situation that could have ended in violence ended in unity. Bumpy understood the deeper truth, and he never said it for applause. He said it because it was real. The Mafia didn't stay away because they feared one man. They stayed away because they realized Harlem had decided it would not be divided. And that's the kind of power that doesn't need shouting. It doesn't need slurs. It doesn't even need a gun. It needs people who choose dignity together, even when it would be easier to choose rage alone. Before winter ended, the coat drive reached every family on that list. Cal wore his new coat to school, and when he saw another kid being mocked, he stepped in, not with fists, but with words that sounded a lot like his mother's. "That's not truth. That's sickness." The teacher later told Loretta, "Your son has leadership in him." Loretta nodded, thinking of Bumpy's steady posture, of that open hand raised to stop chaos, of the 6 words that drew a line without spilling blood. "In Harlem, respect is the law," she said quietly. And for a long time after, the neighborhood remembered. Not the slur, not the swagger, not the threat, but the boundary, the dignity, the moment Harlem chose to be more than what outsiders expected.